Hey everyone, it's Justin again. Remember that game of Battleship we talked about in the previous lesson? It's all about plotting specific locations on a grid. We're going to learn how to do something similar to this today, but in math, we call it plotting points on a coordinate plane. I'm going to teach you all about this today, and then we're going to complete 3 example problems together. Let's get into it. First, let's talk about what a coordinate plane is and all of its parts. Here's a coordinate plane. It's a flat surface with grid marks on it. It technically goes on forever in each direction, but since it would be impossible to show the entire coordinate plane, we just use arrows to show that, yeah, it does continue forever in all directions. The coordinate plane consists of an x-axis, which goes horizontally from left to right, and a y-axis, which goes vertically from bottom to top. Where the x-axis and the y-axis meet is called the origin. The x-axis and y-axis split the coordinate plane up into 4 quadrants. The first quadrant is on the top right side. The second quadrant is on the top left side, quadrant 3 is on the bottom left side, and quadrant 4 is on the bottom right side. You might have noticed that the quadrants are presented using Roman numerals, but if you prefer to just write them using regular numbers, that's totally fine too. There's one more thing I want to show you about the coordinate plane. It contains grid marks, and each of these grid marks typically represents 1 unit. Let me show you what I mean. In the x direction, these grid marks represent positive numbers. And these grid marks represent negative x values. That leaves an x value of 0 right here. This is very similar for the y values, but instead of moving left and right, we move down and up. This is where the positive y values are placed. And here's where the negative y values are placed. And right in the middle of those is a y value of 0. You can think of these numbers as a way to communicate locations to another person. Now that you have background information about the coordinate plane, let's learn how to plot points on it. A point represents a specific location on the graph, and it's represented with a dot. Points are written as parentheses with 2 numbers inside of it, separated by a comma. So in order to understand how to plot points, also known as coordinate points, and ordered pairs, let's look at the origin first. The origin is the point 0, 0. This first number represents the movement along the x-axis, and since this point isn't in the section where x is negative, or in the section where x is positive, it's just at an x value of 0. The second number in our coordinate point, or ordered pair, tells us the movement along the y-axis. Can you explain the reason that the y value for this point is 0? Yep, it's not in the section where the y values are negative, or in the section where the y values are positive. So it's just in between those where y is 0. Since the point 0, 0 represents no movement along either axis, it's where we start when we're plotting other points. Points can be plotted by moving from the origin into quadrants 1, 2, 3, and 4, and also on the x-axis and on the y-axis. Let me show you what I mean through some example problems. We're going to complete 3 examples together. This first example says to plot the point 4, -2, and then state the quadrant it's in. Remember, that first number in the ordered pair tells us how to move along the x-axis, starting from the origin. And the second number tells us how to move along the y-axis. So let's start with the x value. Since it's +4, which way do you think we should move along the x-axis? To the left or to the right? We're going to move 4 units to the right of the origin. Let's keep this 4 here for a moment while we look into the y value. Remember that the y value represents our movement along the y-axis. So we'll need to move down or up. For a y value of -2, which direction do we need to move? We need to move down from the origin 2 units. Then we can follow along the grid lines to see where the x value of 4 and the y value of -2 meet. That's where the point 4, -2 is located. Now we can erase any marks we made on our paper, and voila! We have graphed the point 4, -2. But we haven't answered the entire question just yet. Do you know what quadrant this point is in? It's in quadrant 4. Notice that I use a capital Q instead of writing the whole word quadrant out. So if you like that better, you are welcome to do the same. Anyways, now we have our entire answer. Here's our second example problem. It says to identify which point has the coordinates -7, -4. The answer to this will be one of the letters shown on this coordinate plane. So go ahead and find the answer to this one on your own. Pause the video now. When you're solving this, you might have noticed that both the x value and y value are negative. If both x and y are negative, which quadrant should our answer be in? Well, if we have to move to the left for our x value, and down for our y value, then where those overlap is in the third quadrant. So I'm already thinking that the answer is either point E or point F. Well, let's travel -7 in the x direction. And then -4 in the y direction. Now let's see where those intersect. Aha! It's at point E, and that's the answer. Here's one more to try. It says to plot the point -5, 0 and state the quadrant it's in. Let's see if you can get a start on this without me, or maybe even get the entire answer by yourself. Remember to figure out where this x value is located, and then the y value, and then find where they meet up. Then you can figure out what quadrant you ended up in. Pause the video now and work through this yourself. Moving to -5 along the x-axis takes us here. And then moving 0 along the y-axis, well, what does that mean? Well, we wouldn't move down or up at all along the y-axis. So our point gets to stay right here on the x-axis. Let's meet the y value of 0 up with the x value of -5, and we land right here. We can get rid of our scratch work and then label our picture. Now, were you able to figure out what quadrant this is in? You might be thinking that something seems strange about this, and that it seems like it could be in quadrant 2 or quadrant 3. Well, the truth is, this isn't a quadrant. Instead, the point is on the x-axis. So let's state that this isn't in a quadrant, but rather on the x-axis as part of our final answer. Now you can plot points on a coordinate plane. Remember, the first number in an ordered pair represents the x value and movement left and right from the origin. And the y value represents how far we move down or up from the origin. Also, remember that points can be in any of the 4 quadrants, or on the x-axis, or on the y-axis. Now that you've completed this lesson's video and guided notes, take a moment to reflect on your understanding and decide if you're ready to move on to the additional practice in the PDF. The additional practice is on the page following the notes you just took, so do that next to make sure you're ready to take on the online practice game. See you next time! Hey.